a quarter.
So stack his
I'm
ass.
considering to
Yes, we're just gonna stack
quote quote stack his ass. Okay, this is a very advanced play. Pay attention, guys, we have currently opened up a limited amount of spots for free one-on-one coaching with me and Adam for the people who now join the Mechanics of Poker program. So are you ready to improve your game? Go over to the site and sign up to the Mechanics of Poker program. Also make sure to join our Discord channel and sign up to our newsletter so you don't miss out on any new promotions. Hi there, boys and girls and everything in the middle. Fellow poker enthusiasts, and welcome to a new video here on the Poker Ambition channel, in which today we are going to be taking a look at a hand that I've played in one of my previous streams. There was quite some commotion about it, and actually I was quite interested as well to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the hand. Also kind of showing you the process that I go through after I play the hand, like how am I gonna figure out if the hand was played correctly, if I could maybe learn something from the hand, if there was something that I missed. I think especially since I've also twitched while playing the hand, I can also kind of look at my thought process to see if something goes on in there. So I think it will be just very valuable for you guys to kind of see how that process looks like. If you like this video, guys, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel as I'll be releasing more videos. And let's get into the hand. So we are at the YouTube channel of Poker Ambition and we're looking at previous stream highlights. Video starts off with a little clip of Matrix.
Dodging bullets.
While we are gonna flop a 10 with pocket 10s.
Flop a 10 with pocket 10s.
Very important. Predicting what's going to happen.
We're predicting the fucking future.
A little Conor McGregor quote.
I'm the fucking future.
I would say this is classified as an above average flop.
Clearly in our thought process at the moment there's nothing going on of value.
Here,
so this is the first introduce point. Our opponent c-bets a quarter, and I'm considering to
we're just gonna stack
quote stack his ass. Okay, this is a very advanced play. But I face a quarter of the pot on the flop and I have a decision now. So first step in general when you try to evaluate a poker hand is usually nowadays you look at what does a solver do, okay? What is optimal in an optimal world? So I ran a little sim for you guys. We have the 10-3-3 going on. This is gonna be our out of position range, approximately calling a 4-bet from the big blind versus the cutoff. As you can see, pocket 10s is gonna be there in there at 100% frequency. The rest of our range is gonna be a little bit stronger overpairs like jacks and queens, slow play aces some of the time, ace king, and some high broadways and maybe like some suited connectors. So as kind of predicted, the imposition will basically bet range for a quarter of the pot. And he bets, and now we can actually see that we're going to be raising 37% at the time. And you can see that even if we flop top boat, stacking his ass is clearly a play that the solver does sometimes prefer. This is something that I think, same with like check raising aces almost at a full frequency, is something that not a lot of people do in 4-bet pots. So this is a concept that I'm aware of, and something that while playing the hand or while playing 4-bet pots as the caller, I do try to look to fast play a little bit more often. So this is a thought that was somewhere in the back of my head. We didn't go for the check raise. We actually went for the check call. And the turn was a deuce. And let's see what happened.
He's very likely has an overpair, jacks, queens, kings, aces. I don't want to scare.
So here we can see my main thought process. Stack his ass. He has a lot of overpairs. It's quite a tight position. We're playing cutoff versus big blind. In general, the big blind tends to 3-bet. If we talk about like a tendency of the population, the big blind tends to 3-bet a little bit less than GTO. And what you then often see is that the cutoff also responds by 4-bet bluffing a little bit less than in GTO. And this is something that you often see in population imbalances. When there's an imbalance in one side of the tree, kind of the population intuitively responds by countering that in the other side of the tree. So the big blind is under 3 betting, therefore the cutoff starts under 4 bet bluffing. This is something, for example, that I take in consideration. Let's say we would have played this hand small blind versus button. I would estimate population to have a little bit more bluffs. My range is a little bit wider, so their willingness to follow through based on the fact that my range is a little bit wider as well is going to be a little bit higher. So I would not have check raise. Now I just estimated that overpairs were a bigger proportion of his range. And you heard me say I don't really want a scare card to fall off. Now, if we look at the board, 3-3, 10, deuce, there aren't that many scare cards, right? Obviously, if an ace rolls off, that's probably the worst card. His jacks, queens, kings are no longer going to pay me off. Maybe I should do some leading, something that we could actually consider. But let's see what the solver does first. So we came to the deuce. Actually, I didn't have any leads in the sim. And we can actually see that we will, or at least the sim will have quite a high barreling frequency. If he did show up with a bluff like ace-9 suited, ace-8 suited, king-9 suited, which are kind of preferred bluffs in this position, maybe like a 10-9 suited. You can see actually 10-9 suited is always checking. These bluffs are following through at basically 100% frequency, because these hands weren't in there at 100% frequency pre-flop. So the combos that he does have, he decides to always barrel. Here you can see with the king, queen, and the ace, jack, he decides to do kind of the same. And I think ace, king here, we can see quite a high barreling frequency still. And I think here is where a lot of people will just take their showdown value. I don't think this is a barreling frequency that most players will use. I do also think that kings is in there at a higher frequency. Same with aces. They are probably also just going to use the I'm going to stack his ass strategy. And ace queen is actually not barreling that often. This is probably something to do with the fact that it's going to block hands that I will fold, like ace queen suited. Yeah, that's going to be my primary float on the flop. So yeah, we bet and now it's up to us. And here we can actually see that tens is just a pure call. If we had queens, we now will do some check raising, but basically the check raising mainly occurred on the flop and not on the turn. So basically I should have used the stack his ass on the flop, and as played in a solver world, I should have slow played. This is mainly because, as we saw, he's bluffing at quite a high frequency and he's sometimes checking kings. So we can see in the solver that, okay, in an optimal world, this might be optimal, but my estimation was that he had last combinations pre in bluffs, and that he will barrel at a less bluffy frequency. So now we have to give him new information and then show us what is the optimal strategy if my assumptions are correct. So for that, we have played around a little bit. Flop is the same. Turn is a 10. And here you can see in the sim as well, it's locked. That's because I've reduced the barreling frequency of air. Actually, I didn't increase kings. Actually, let me show you guys straight away how to do that. Why not? So we say that this is the range and we want kings to just always barrel. Same with ace. Let's say he just always barrels as overpair. So here we can now see they have 100% barreling frequency. I already reduced the bluffs. We let the sim run. It's going to be very fast as it's a 4-bet pot. It's already stopped. So now we have the scenario where if we check, villain is betting overpairs at a very high frequency, and we lowered his bluffing frequency with air. Now actually what we can see is that tens is going to become a pure check raise. Now obviously when we go down this tree, it becomes a little bit more dangerous because we're working on assumptions. A lot of people like to stay away from assumptions completely, and I think this is very incorrect. There's a lot of people that talk more about, you know, the intuitive movement. Shout out to Mr. Charlie Carroll. And
I am lucky, I am skillful, and I will win. You got to feel it.
And I think using your intuition and kind of maneuvering around the population, and as Helmut would like to call it, kind of dodge bullets here and there, and maybe stack someone's ass here and there, even though GTO doesn't prefer it. I think this is kind of what turns an average mid-stakes player into a very good player, right? Making those right adjustments. So now we can see that we clearly want to check raise and we want to hero fold because his range is going to be a little bit stronger for all reasons that I've explained. So if my assumptions are correct, this was indeed a profitable jam.
I don't want the scare card.
So back to the hand, we indeed jammed and he folded. unfortunately.
He actually had a bluff. Okay.
And
Respect
you can
for him.
hear
respect
also
for
in
him.
my response, okay, he actually had a bluff, you know, respect for him. I did not expect that. I would have expected his range to be a little bit too value heavy and therefore made an adjustment that I thought was higher EV. Now, another way to do this, and now we're gonna go a little bit more to the dinosaur age of solving a poker hand, is a program that I find very valuable and I think is very underused. If any of my CFP students are now watching, it's like, oh no, the Wacko is gonna open card runners EV again. And you're damn right, I'm gonna open card runners EV again. This is card runners EV. This was kind of the solver before solvers, where it would give you the EVs of plays, but you had to put in the variables. So obviously it's quite biased. But I still think it's a very valuable program. I think they also have, I think this GTO Plus, I think that's their solver program. But I'm mainly here for the card runners EV. So what I did was I gave the cutoff a range. He opened, we 3-betted at the pocket tens. I made him 4-bet, and in the 4-bet range, I already kind of estimated, okay, how much bluffs is he gonna have. I think he was now folding to a 5-bet around 35% of the time, which I think is quite reasonable for population as well. Then flop 10-3. Like I said, I expect him to just bet range for a quarter of the pot. You can see the EVs of his bet, where they are basically all minus EV. That's because we always have a boat, because I only gave us tens. And because it's not solving based on all the information, that doesn't really matter. We just want to focus on, okay, what is the EV of our hand, and mainly on the turn. So how do we do that? We call. Turn. Now the return is the first place where we have to then make estimations, right? So here you can see that in my estimations, I've made him barrel always a hand higher than an overpair. Basically, I said at least an overpair 100% of the time. And then with a lot of these hands like top pair, I made him bet 50% of the time. And then like some bluffs 50% of the time. And here we can see the total. And you can see that also, for example, the ace jack and the king queen, they kind of fade away. That's because it's less combinations. So in the end, he has a barrel frequency of 62, and at least or around half of his barrel range is going to be an overpair, and he will have some checks. And now this is kind of the decision point, right? Do we raise or do we call? Now, obviously raising, it's plus EV, it's winning us 116 chips, 116 BB, because we have the nuts, basically always. And here we can see his losses, because he's obviously always losing. So now we have to compare the EV of raising with the EV of calling. So how do we do that? Well, I made him raise, and then it's at 50%. So I open up another tree towards call. And here you can actually see that the calling option right now here, it says 117. Here it says 116. So I already did some first calculations, estimations, and we can actually see that it's very close. But here comes now, I think, the good future, because for these kind of spots, I think card runners EV is very handy. You can now group rivers. So I group the river in blanks, a 10, a jack, a queen, a king, and an ace. And you can play around in the tree. So what I said, on blanks, we check. Obviously, I think our EV of checking on blanks is going to be very high, 145. This is basically, like I said, one of the reasons why you want to jam now is because he has a lot of overpairs. You don't want scare cards to run off. While a blank is not really a scare card, so we're not losing any value, and he's sometimes bluffing. So what I told him was, listen, you're now always jamming your overpairs. I sometimes made him check jacks because the positions are quite tight, and maybe like, for example, on a 9, he might be scared of 9s. So do think he might still also be scared of queens. He might be scared of aces, might be scared of 10s. So I don't think it's unreasonable for someone to check back jack some of the time. And I made him bluff the high cards that he arrived to on the river 50% of the time. Now, obviously, if I would increase this number, so we now have the call at 117 EV. If I would now say he's barreling, he's gonna barrel the river 75% of the time, so you're against a more aggressive player, and we run the calculation again, we can see that we won 3 more big blinds by calling the turn, because in the future we will get bluffed more often, right? So this is also a more practical example versus more aggressive opponents. Obviously, you know, if you play versus a guy who's completely out of his mind, then, and he's just bluffing way too much, then obviously I would never consider raising the turn. So the main problem is going to come when, let's say, the river is a king. Because now suddenly in his checkback range he's gonna have jacks and queens, and these were hands that we were actually getting value from on the turn that now we lose value from. So that has to then be compensated by the fact that he's now gonna be bluffing ace jack, ace queen, and his ace nine suited, etc, etc. Same with an ace. I think the ace, like I said, is probably the worst card. You can see also our check EV here, wins only 90, because he's just gonna, yeah, his high cards is gonna have a top pair, and yeah, we're basically in trouble. He's just gonna check back a lot and we're not gonna win any money. So this is another interesting way of calculating, in my opinion, especially turn spots where you kind of doubt between two lines. You can then kind of play around with the variables, and this is, in my opinion, a very important skill, and this is something that people forget when they just look at the solver. You need to understand the variables that impact the EV. So in this case, like I said, if we have someone who's completely out of his mind, stacking his ass is not a very good strategy. Then, you know, giving him rope and letting him hang himself is a correct strategy. And how to make a lot of money in poker is to estimate that on the table, estimate the profile of your opponent, and then adjust accordingly. So conclusion being, it's quite close. It was not necessarily not a bad idea, but it was also not necessarily a very good idea. Let's say, for example, the turn had a flush draw to go with it, like a 9 of hearts, for example. Then you could actually make some arguments that maybe on flush rivers he would check back a bit more often with overpairs. That would actually maybe be a reason to jam a little bit more. But now, as you could see, the EVs were actually quite close. Now, if you guys liked this analysis and if you want to see me do more analysis of hands that were very interesting on stream, you know, leave comments down below, create a discussion about hands that I played, and maybe I will pick up on that and create a future video. I hope you guys learned a lot from it. I think knowing how to evaluate hands that you've played, whether that's hands that you played very well or very wrong. In the end, guys, in poker, like you see on my streams as well, I make various mistakes. It's what you're gonna do with that mistakes and how you're gonna learn from that mistakes. The person who's gonna learn the most from his mistakes and knows how to learn from his mistakes, that's the person that's gonna end up on top. So, am I going to see you on top? Or are you going to say, the solver is 100% calling, I am GTO? Up to you. Now, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Take a look at other videos that we've made. I'm sure you will like them as well. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. And make sure to join our Discord community so you can stay up to date with new content, new promotions that we have running here at Poker Ambition. And if you want to know more about Poker Ambition and our services, go over to the site pokerambition.com. Thank you guys for watching and see you in the next video.